World War I was the first war to be fought on a global scale, as its name implies. Until then, there had been wars involving multiple countries at once. There was the Napoleonic War, an all-European effort to stop Napoleon, and the Crimean War, fought by France, Britain, and others against the Ottoman Empire to stop Russia from going south. Going back even further, there was the 30 Years' War in Europe. But the First World War was literally called the World War for a few reasons. The first was that it was the first large-scale war fought after the Industrial Revolution. Whereas previous wars had been fought between armies, the First World War was a total war, involving the total capabilities of nations. Not only were there industrialized weapons such as aircrafts and tanks, but also poison gas, which made war more devastating than ever before. Secondly, the war zone and the countries involved were more global than any other war before it. Europe, Africa, and Asia were the war zones, and the participants were not only European countries, but also the United States across the Atlantic and even Japan. The third is the impact of World War I. Whereas previous wars had been small-scale adjustments of interests and borders between nations, World War I led to fundamental changes in the boundaries of nations and international relations. The Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Ottoman Empire lost vast territories and were reduced to what is now Austria and Turkey. So let's look at the causes and course of the war. To understand World War I, you have to know Germany, and you have to know Prussia and the iron-blooded Bismarck who united Germany. Until the early 1800s, Germany was a federal state made up of 38 German-speaking countries. It was made up of autonomous states that cooperated in foreign wars and held federal conferences to consult. Austria was the most powerful, followed by Prussia. It was Prussia that broke this order. Prussia provoked Austria, and in 1866, Austria went to war against Prussia, but Prussia, with its strong economy and preparation for war, won by a comfortable margin. Instead of marching into Austria and annexing it, Prussia stops and remains allied with Austria. In 1870, Prussia provokes France into war and wins this war as well. Upon receiving France's surrender, Prussia declares a unified Germany. Bismarck then proceeds to run the country in a way that strengthens Germany. Bismarck prepares for the threat of attack from other European nations. He forms an alliance with Russia and invites Austria to join him in the Triple Alliance. The alliance with Russia avoids the risk of being attacked by France and Russia, East and West, at the same time. He also makes a deal with Britain. In exchange for Germany not colonizing overseas, Britain will remain silent about Germany's behavior in continental Europe. Since then, Germany had been a powerhouse on the European continent, dedicated to building up the country. But then something unexpected happened. Wilhelm IV, who had trusted Bismarck, died in 1888. The newly crowned emperor, Wilhelm II, was as ambitious as he was young. Public opinion in Germany also turned against Bismarck, arguing that the country should be colonizing overseas as befits its power. Eventually, Wilhelm II dismissed Bismarck in 1890. He began to build up his naval power. This was a reversal of Bismarck's promise to Britain to stay on the continent. He also broke with his alliance with Russia to keep France in check. With Bismarck's fall, the balance of power on the continent was upset by an expanding Germany, and confrontation began. Eventually, Britain and France formed the Anglo-French alliance in 1904 to keep Germany in check. In 1907, Germany's broken alliance with Russia led to the Triple Entente of Britain, France, and Russia. Germany and Austria were the only two countries that stand up to Germany. Italy, which had previously been part of the Triple Alliance, withdrew from the Triple Alliance and remains neutral. An alliance of Germany and Austria against Britain, France, and Russia. This was the situation on the eve of the First World War. In the Balkans, where the Austrian crown prince was assassinated, which started the First World War, there were countries that had been fighting the Ottoman Turks with the help of European countries before the First World War. At the time, Bosnia was an Austrian colony and Serbia was an independent country. Bosnian was 50% ethnically Serbian, and there was a movement for independence from Austria. It was there that a young Serbian-Bosnian man assassinated an Austrian crown prince. Serbia had nothing to do with this event, except that the assassin, the young man, was of Serbian descent, but Austria was furious at Serbia. The real intention was to prevent Russia, a Slavic nation, from making inroads into the Balkans and Mediterranean with fellow Slavs Serbia. On 28 July 1914, the war began when Austria declared war on Serbia. Russia declared general mobilization in support of Serbia, and Germany did the same at Austria's request. Germany also declared war on Russia, which naturally brought France and Britain, who were allied with Russia, into the war. Britain's actual rationale for joining the war was that Germany had invaded neutral Belgium. Once Russia and France became allies and joined the war, the thing that Bismarck feared most happened. Germany was going to be attacked from the east and west by France and Russia. Germany had prepared for this. It was called the Schlieffen Plan. Defeat France first within 40 days of the start of the war, then attack Russia, on the premise that Russia's vast landmass would take time to fight a war, even if a general mobilization order was issued. There was also a detailed plan for transporting troops by rail. But it was impossible to keep the railways running as planned during a war. At that time, the railway was single-track and could only run in one direction, making it difficult to operate, as it could be blown up along the way or rendered inoperable during combat. Furthermore, German troops attempting to avoid the German-French border and advance through Belgium into France would be slowed by strong Belgian resistance. Russia also mobilized its forces quickly, contrary to German expectations. Germany's Schlieffen Plan to defeat France first and deal with Russia later ultimately failed, and Germany was forced to fight a war against France on the Western Front and Russia on the Eastern Front simultaneously. Austria was no help, leaving Germany to fight the war alone. To add insult to injury, Britain imposed a naval blockade, making food supplies difficult. With two fronts to maintain, the German army, which had advanced as far as the Marne River near Paris, was unable to advance any further, and the front was stalemated. This was when the famous trench warfare began. The Germans and Allies digged trenches on either side of a 500-meter gap and engaged in a tedious battle. The Germans launched a major offensive in the Verdun area in February 1916 to break the deadlock, but the French put up a determined defense, and by December of that year, the Battle of Verdun had claimed more than 700,000 deaths on both sides. Although the death toll was similar on both sides, the Germans lost their elite soldiers in this battle. The British naval blockade left Germany short of food, and in an attempt to overcome the situation, they attacked British merchant ships using U-boats. Along with the British naval blockade, Germany suffered a famine in 1916, forcing soldiers and civilians alike to eat nothing but turnips, which were fodder for pigs. In October 1917, the Bolshevik Revolution broke out in Russia, improved the situation on the Eastern Front, but not the Western Front. Suddenly, indiscriminate attacks on merchant ships by U-boats brought the United States into the war in April 1917. Things took a turn for the worst for Germany. Germany launched its final offensive in March 1918 with the Spring Offensive. It won the initial battles but was defeated by the returning Allies as starving Germans concentrate on the food left behind by the Allies. By this time, 250,000 of the German army's remaining troops had been killed. When the Allied armies eventually crossed Germany's borders, Wilhelm II ordered the Navy to set sail. With defeat a certainty, the order was to fight and die. The Navy disobeyed the order. The sailors in the port of Kiel mutinied, and the workers sympathized with their action by going on strike. Wilhelm II fled to the Netherlands, and the Weimar Republic that followed surrendered on 11 November 1918. The Paris Reinforcement Conference, held at the Palace of Versailles in 1918, then set a hefty reparations bill for Germany. The reparations were to be 10% of Germany's GDP for 20 years. This would later be the seed for Hitler to come to power and start World War II.